All right, we have just finished our 200th episode of the podcast, and to kickstart the next 200 episodes, we have two, arguably the most special guests we've ever had here on the pod. One is, and I hesitate to say this, but it seems to be true, a friend of the pod. He's been on twice before, already once again this year. Each time he brings a friend with him, and this time is no different. He's a man who truly warrants no introduction at this point. You know him as one of the greatest surfers to ever have graced a surfboard. He is a man whose reputation of fearlessness and style absolutely precedes him, a singular icon within the sport. Everyone knows him as Mr. Pipeline. For the third time on the podcast, the one and only Gerry Lopez. Gerry, thanks so much for coming on. And your buddy today, our second guest, someone who earned an international reputation for his tube riding at the famed and virtually perfect breaks of Uluwatu and Padang Padang and beyond. He's known as one of the original surfers, alongside Gerry and Roy Russell, to make extended visits to Indonesia, often staying for half the year and doing so for over a decade, surfing and pioneering the famed reef breaks there, and is generally one of the most celebrated and storied surfers in our history. We have Newcastle's Peter McCabe with us on the podcast. Guys, I'm so excited. Thank you guys for coming on the lineup.
No, that's great. Thanks for having us.
This idea, Pete, came up. Gerry was on a couple months ago, and we were talking about X, Y, and Z. We got on the topic of Grajagan and Sea of Darkness, and we were talking about you, and he goes, you should get Peter on to talk about Grajagan. And I'm like, do you think he'd come on? He goes, oh. And within a couple days, Gerry had lined it up. So Gerry gets a producer credit on this episode for sure. But well, let's start with you, Pete. Where are we talking to you from today? Are you home in Newcastle? Where are you at?
I sure am. I'm just sitting in the east wing at home. Like, the sun's just about to come up behind me, or it is up. And yeah, I'm right here in Newcastle. I work, I don't know if everyone's familiar with Newey so much, but it's not far from Sydney, but it's a long way from the Gold Coast. and it's only 6 hours.
But it's sure produced a lot of great surfers.
Oh my
gosh.
gosh.
Yeah, sure has. You know, Emma, Luke, Matt Hoy, Simon Law, who else? Craigie Anderson. The list goes on and on.
And on. And I've been fortunate enough I've got one of my best friends lives there in Merriweather Heights, so spent a ton of time there. And I actually think the lineup has a very strong Newcastle listening. You know, the boys at Slime Surf Shop, shout out to them too. I'm sure they're tuning in for this one.
Oh.
But it's middle of winter there, right, Peter? So is it pretty cold at the moment?
Real cold.
Oof.
But it's supposed to be one of the hottest winter days today, like later on. So can't wait. I just surfed 3 days in a row, and but I hadn't surfed for over a month because I've been sick as from the dreaded flu, whatever they got. You know, I don't know, but I've come good, luckily.
Right.
Yeah, I wouldn't even been able to talk to you guys last week.
Oh, I'm glad you're feeling better, and I'm glad you're back in the water. Yeah.
Heaps better, mate. Heaps better.
Now, Gerry, the last time you and I talked, I think you were down in Cabo, and you certainly live a bon vivant lifestyle. Where are you at the moment?
I'm in Bend, Oregon.
Oh, home base.
Middle of summer. There's about 100 fires going off in the state of Oregon, so the smoke's pretty bad. Tomorrow, we're going to get on the road and drive down to California to see our son.
Oh, good. And is he still down in Oceanside?
He's in Oceanside.
Awesome. Well, so we are recording this. It's July 24th. It's going to come out a week later. And surfing globally is going to have its attention on French Polynesia. It's going to be in Teahupo'o, Tahiti for the Paris Games, the Olympic Games 2024. It's fun that we get to talk to you guys at this time period, because I think what we want to talk about the early days of Grajagan and what it was like for you then, and what surfing was really like then, probably at pretty opposite ends of the spectrum from what you maybe imagined it would be, you know, all these years later with surfers and the Olympics in Tahiti. But, you know, Gerry, real quick, have you been kind of tracking what's going on with the Olympics this year? Are you paying attention to anyone that's in it? And are you going to watch?
Absolutely. Yes, I think that it'll be quite a venue. And if they get a nice swell, which I hope they do, it's really going to be quite a show. And, you know, they got the greatest surfers in the world there. And they got a pretty good surf spot. I was just with Raimana last week, and we were talking about it. He was up at the surf ranch, and he's, of course, dashing home to be there for it. He's the Tahitian ambassador to the world,
right,
for surfing, and I think it's really going to be probably the best Olympic surfing that maybe we'll ever see. We'll have to see.
That's a good point. And, Pete, we're going to dive into it here in this conversation, but, thinking back to what professional surfing was like when you started, could you have imagined that it would become an Olympic sport back then? Or maybe you could have. Maybe that was the plan. I'm curious, though.
No, I could never imagine it being, in the Olympics. And, I've got some friends that are in the Olympics too, so I'm right there with Gerry. I'll be watching, and it should be quite amazing. But yeah, there's no chance I would have thought that, it would have gone that far down. Like actually, way back in the day when we was all surfing, I could only just get as far as the next swell, pretty much.
Right.
For what I was going to be surfing.
But that's a very in the present kind of approach. That's probably, you could argue that's why you were so successful as well. You weren't thinking too far out. You're like, all right, I'm just focused on the next wave and the next session and the what's happening the next day.
Yeah, pretty much, because it's coming up to 50 years since we went in there, so it's quite a time span in anybody's history, I guess. But there's no chance I would have thought it would come this far. And after that little period, it just moved ahead in leaps and bounds after us, once the tri-fins and the whole evolution of the boards and everything from what we were surfing to what they're surfing today is insane, Right. So, and I watch every single contest from start to finish, whether it's shit or not, and I'm just like glued to it, and it's just amazing how much it's just changed. Do you agree, GL?
No question.
Well, Peter, you just said something that clicked for me. That it was almost 50 years ago. It was 1976 when we both went in the first time. And that was 48 years ago. Holy cow.
Well, we're coming up. So 76 is a big number for us because that's the first official world tour year, right? So we're coming up on our 50-year anniversary as well. Let's transition. We're talking about an idyllic kind of left-hand reef pass. Let's move to another one in Grajagan. Now, Gerry, you and I joked about this last time, but the sort of unofficial and I guess purchased off the rack kind of and secret and taboo film about those early days in the archipelago is Michael Oblovitz's Sea of Darkness. And anyone that's ever been on a boat trip in the Mentawais over the last decade's probably seen a pirated copy of it. And there's a huge segment on Grajagan and on Gerry and on you, Peter, in those early days there. Pete, for listeners who are unfamiliar with Grajagan, how would you describe it? Not only the wave, but just the camp and the vibe there.
Well, since from I guess from way back, and we can forget about that Sea of Darkness. Because, that was just pulled out of thin air. There's some stuff there, but the camp back when we first went in, taking the boats over and everything like that, we had our fearless leader, Boyum, who was so good on everything, getting us there. And the logistics of getting us over there when the first camp opened up, that in itself was such a mission. And, everything was, for us, we were still young, and it wasn't, where are we going? And but once we got there, and I'm sort of losing it a bit here, but it was really, it was just eye-opening, and you couldn't walk anywhere. There was nothing, absolutely nothing, except for this tiny little camp in the middle of nowhere. And then you look in that way, and it's just full jungle. Then you turn around, you'd be looking at the most longest, perfect left-hand wave you're ever going to see in your life. And then all we were thinking about is, how do we get out?
Right. Right.
And then we just started from there, just going in. But it's from way back, and we actually, it was such a tiny thing, and the stuff was in, and Boyum had it organized that we really didn't need anything. Like, we even had make up hot water from the jerry cans on the beach, and then when we come in after 8 hours, I might tell you, and then the food was exceptional, and it was just enough.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think Gerry has described it as a surfing monastery, and just the way you described it was beautiful too, Peter, where it's everything revolves around the tide and surfing and figuring out the wave. And especially back then, you don't have phones or computers or distractions. It is survive, get in tune with your body, get in tune with the rhythm of the land and the ocean. And it does seem like it was such a spiritual place even then. Gerry, do you want to expand on that at all? Because I know you've spoke about it so well in the past.
Well, I think, one of the most interesting things was the very first time we went by boat. And, we anchored the boats there in what later became the boat channel to go in and out to shore. And we paddled from the boats, and the waves were great that day, straight offshore wind. And we kept looking up the line. Oh, look at that up there, and I guess we didn't even realize it, but we kept paddling. And then all of a sudden, Peter goes, "Hey, what happened to the boats?" And we turned around, and I mean, the boats were right there. That's where we started from. And we had gone so far around the point that you couldn't even see the boats anymore. We went, "Oh my God.
Now what?
Did they sink?"
Right.
We didn't know. And I think the most difficult part of that first trip was trying to figure out where the lineup was, trying to figure out a good spot to take off, because everything looked good, but we had no idea. And it really wasn't until that Boyum came through with the beach camp, the surf camp, which was in itself a very creative idea. No one had ever done anything like this. Dave Clark got the idea from Boyum's camp to put a surf camp in Tavarua. But when we got on the beach, we could have a different perspective of the wave, and we could see where, that looks like a takeoff spot. And, down there where the launch pad was, that could be another takeoff spot. And we built the camp right in front of the outside takeoff, the money trees takeoff. And we had I think it was an orange tarp that covered the grass roof there. So, we had a lineup, and that changed everything. That made us realize that, okay, now we can really figure out how to ride this wave. And it was, and still in, I think, both our minds, probably the most exceptional, the most challenging, the longest, the best wave that we've ever surfed. And it still is, just like anywhere, the waves don't change. It's just us guys get older. And Peter was just there last week.
So I want to hear about that, Peter. But before you talk about last week, I was going to ask you, Do you remember the very first wave you caught at Grajagan? And if so, can you retell the story?
Me? Well, we sailed over from Bali,
Yeah.
came around the point, so we left at like dawn in the morning from the other side on the Nusa Dua side, and then we sailed in this rickety old turtle boat, and then we come around to, it was about, like, we got to, it was like about, it seemed like it took forever. Well, it took about 12 hours or more to go 60 Ks, or 60 miles. But I remember it's about 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and, the sun was sort of going down, and we come around the point, and I was sitting there with Fitzy and Dave and Michelle, and then I just saw these waves, and I already had my board, and it was just there. I just jumped off the boat, just like that, and boat kept going, and I just kept, I just jumped over, had no idea where I was, and I just paddled into I'm just these lefts going. Luckily for me, it wasn't very big, it was about 4 feet and just peeling all the way, probably only 3 to 4 feet, but just endless. And then, and it was, I guess it would have been up up top, because that's where I first saw it, and it was just offshore, I'm over the side, just, no, I don't even know where I am, nothing, and I'm just, well, wow. And then I remember, I can't really think my first wave, but I guess the first one would have been like the last one, I guess. So,
as Gerry said, the wave's the same.
Yeah. So,
what about you, Gerry? Do you have like a profound memory of just that maybe just first session? Because as you said, it's a wave unlike anything else.
Yeah, that first trip was pretty blurry because, when you come from a boat, you really lose a lot of perspective.
Right.
And the wave, seems different, even though it's the same wave. And I mean, we had no idea whether it was a high tide or a low tide. We just paddled out. And, there it was. And it really wasn't until that Mike set the camp up on the beach that all of a sudden, hey, this is really a special wave. Before that, it was kind of a mystery.
I'll bet.
When you don't know where you are, where to take off, you're just kind of, fumbling around. And then, when we started staging from the beach, everything really came together. And then it was just onward and upward. And you really have to say something about Mike Boyum. He's been vilified by a lot of people over the years, especially in the Sea of Darkness film. And, in much the same way that Grubby Clark at Clark Foam has been, kind of portrayed as a tyrant.
Right.
And Mike, several of the other books that have come out about G-Land, he's not painted in a very good light, but to us, he was really someone who we were very close to, and we spent a lot of time, a lot of quality time together. Mm-hmm. And like Peter was saying, the getting in and getting out of G-Land was really quite a fat task, and and the food. I mean, like Peter said, we ate like kings, and it was. I mean, I look back on those years and go, that was the best. It couldn't get any better than that, and great memories.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
just
Peter,
touching on that.
Oh, go on. You go for it, Pete.
Yeah, sorry. But just touching on that, when I jumped off that very first, so it's more or less the session, but as it got darker, and I had no idea, and the boat had sailed off and gone around into the boat channel, and I'm just sitting out there by myself going, what the hell, where am I? And so I just started paddling down, and then all of a sudden it's dark, and I'm going, it's getting real dark. So I've paddled all the way around into the keel, and then I seen the old kerosene light on the boat, and I'm just heading for that. And that was, and it took me about 50 years to figure out how dangerous that was. Because no one was going to come and help me.
No, of course. And you mentioned you were there recently. How often do you go back, Peter?
Every year.
Just about every year. But
right.
I'm jealous.
I didn't go during the COVID period.
Right. Yeah.
I just stayed at home because of the mandates and the health regulations and everything. But once that was lifted.
What are the most profound changes to Grajagan in your opinion, Peter, since you started to now? I guess what are the biggest? What feels like the biggest change? I guess for you.
The road in, electricity,
right.
Wi-Fi.
Right.
Should I go on?
Yeah, please. Yeah. But the surfing experience, as Gerry was saying, it's pretty much similar.
The surfing
right?
the waves are the same.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people in there now. Like I was just in last week, and we did a drive-in going through Baliar and Madawi, and just for old time's sake, took the ferry, and that was great. But we went to Madawi, we surfed there in the morning, and there's 120 people out, and the buildings are just built up right on the point break, and and then we went in, and the drive into. We drove right into the point, where it says Bobby's G-Land Camp. Just pulled up in the car, got out.
Wow.
Yeah, it was insane, and it was pretty easy. And but we're passing cars. It's just like almost a highway,
right.
Everything. Everyone's driving in. Sometimes people just leave Madawi in the morning. And then they just drive into G-Land. It takes like 2 hours, if that.
Gerry, when's the last time you were there?
Oh, what was that for your birthday?
Yeah.
That time?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was many years ago now.
Almost 10.
And I, it had been a long time since I'd been there. And I was actually shocked that there were so many people there.
Right.
And, it had changed quite a bit. And I guess the biggest change for me was, how plush the accommodation was, because Bobby put us up in his newest suites, and it was a far cry from the old treehouse and the old days.
I just stayed in that same one that we stayed in, and it's all done up. The first one.
Yeah.
Where we were with and I had it all to myself.
It's like a big house.
Yeah, it was set up for 4 people, but I was in there. And I said, no, I want that, and it was great.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's all relative too, right? Like when we had the event there in 2022. I made a point to make sure I was going because I've never been and wanted to go. And I was excited, and it was, I had a wonderful time, like a great adventure. But it was interesting being there with the Championship Tour surfers because most of them had never been there either. And as you point out, like it is remote, but the accommodation's really nice. You have all these creature comforts. But I think compared to how comfortable parts of Bali proper have gotten, and because there's more waves there that have been discovered, over the last couple of decades, it wasn't that the surfers were unappreciative, but a lot of them were kind of like, why are we out in the remote jungle for this left-hander? We didn't have great waves, obviously a great swell, but it felt weird. And then I was talking to some of the older surfers, and they're like, oh yeah, it's all relative. When we were younger, the places to stay and all the creature comforts in Bali proper were not as nice as they are now. So it was a little bit of a wash, but you would make the pilgrimage to Grajagan for the wave. And I don't know. It was interesting to experience that firsthand in 2022.
Well, when the waves are on, and I don't know who scheduled that contest, but they picked the wrong time to go. We could have told them that.
Yeah.
In the beginning there, we'd only go in for the full moon and new moon tides, the big tides, because we didn't have booties back then.
Right.
And we waited until you could paddle out off the beach and paddle in, and then the waves were so good that we kept pushing the paddle in part until finally we were figuring out, okay, well, we better have some booties because we're staying out here too long, and we'd tuck them down in our Speedos, inside our shorts. And so we always had a little cushion of booties to land on if we landed on our butts on the reef. And that way, we could stay for the
whole day.
Whole day.
Right.
Yeah, and we did. As soon as that, we'd be waiting in the treehouse for that wind to blow offshore and, just hoping that it would come soon. And as soon as the leaves started to move, we'd look at each other and go, okay.
Yeah, there it is.
We'd start getting ready and get out there. And I mean, we'd stay out there all day long. And it was great.
Both of you are world-class board builders in your own right. I'm curious, I'll start with you, Pete. What were the boards you brought on those first trips to Grajagan? I mean, what the sizes, how many of them, and then what was the quiver you took on the last trip?
I had a lot of boards already there in the last time, but the first time we went over, on the very first trip, there were just boards that I just had from Ulu, and they were actually best board I
all
had
single
was his.
fins.
Yeah, and actually the best board I had was his yellow magic board, but I didn't take it then, but I'd been riding it all year. But I had a board I got one from Ricky Raz, and they were about 7 foot, 7'6".
Yeah.
But the transition from then, when Mikey put the first camp up, so I'd already dropped down to 6 foot. So my quiver was it'd be a 6'0", 6'6", and 7'0", right, Gio?
Right,
Yeah.
Yeah, and we'd have those three boards. And then as it got on, then we used to take 2 of the same 3 boards.
Right.
And then we'd have a couple of extra boards. And then, and then when they were single fins, but they were starting to come down. And then when the tri-fins first came out, my boards got, and Gerry's, and we got the tri-fins, and they just, it changed a lot for us. And, but the boards, I've become smaller and narrower, but there was, they'd go from, 5'6" to still 5'6" to 7'0".
Yeah, right.
But as we got so familiar with the surf, and it would be just me and him out most of the time, and then we just days where we could ride our small boards even when it was big, because we only had Gerry, me, and we could, if I wasn't pretty much guaranteed I was going to make the wave, well, I didn't have to take it. See, I just let it go. And then we get the next one and make sure thing ain't going to break on my head or as I was taking off or whatever. and we'd make it. But in saying that, when we were only both of us just out there, just me and him, and the waves are the best stuff, we'd surf all day riding the same wave.
Right.
Going like this. And that was the damnedest shit, let me tell you. And we would just, isn't that right, Gio? We just surf, we just stay there and just, okay, let's go. Boom, off we go. And that's when we were doing the Blue Angels. And I think that was one of the most amazing stuff of our life.
I mean, looking back on my entire career of surfing, I'd have to say that the biggest highlight was those waves that Peter and I rode together. And we called ourselves the Blue Angels. And, you know, we got, I don't know how it started, but we got so good at it that a wave would come and you could see that, you know, we kind of knew that it was a good wave, that he'd look at me or I'd look at him and go, Angels. And we'd take off together, and we were able to ride at full speed and never once got in each other's way, but, you know, go behinds. I mean, I have vivid memories of the outer wave, the Money Trees wave at G-Land is a kind of a highline tube. You know, the tube can be up at the top of the wave. And I remember my board, Peter would be above me. My board would be tucked right under his, but the tube was in between us. He was in the tube and I was just on the other side, that I could have stuck my hand through the curtain and poked him. And we'd go like that, and then, you know, the tube would end and I'd go down, he'd go up, and then we'd do a big go behind. And I mean,
and then he'd be in the same spot. Then he'd be up in the barrel and I'd be standing there looking at him. And then,
but never getting in each other's way at all. Just, I mean, it really was something. And, you know, Jack McCoy got a couple of shots, but no one ever recorded that. And that was pretty much my only regret in surfing that I've ever had, was that, you know, I'd really like to see some of that stuff that we did together, because I think it was pretty special.
Oh, yeah.
I've never seen anyone else ever do that. You know, I see the guys nowadays, every once in a while they'll ride a wave together, but they're always kind of nervous of each other. I don't know, maybe because they're going faster or something, but we were in such tune, in total sync, that it was really a sight to see. And the few people that, you know, we had with us, my brother, Yoshi Ueda from Japan, you know, Mikey's not around anymore, but even brother Bill, you know, Mike's brother, Bill Boyum, he remembers some of those times when Peter and I would ride a big wave, you know, 8 or 10 foot wave together, and just having the time of our lives.
Yeah, it was insane. You know, and people just couldn't even, I don't even think would even dream of that stuff, you know. What's he dropping in on him for?
Right.
You know?
There's only 2 of them out there. No, yeah. I love that story. We're gonna take a quick break to get a word in from our sponsors, and when we come back, we're gonna talk to Peter McCabe and Gerry Lopez a little bit more. All right, we're back. This is the Lineup Podcast. I am Dave Prodan, and I'm honored to be here with both Gerry Lopez and Peter McCabe. Peter, as this is your first time on the podcast, I want to dive into your biography a little bit. And Gerry, obviously, you've known Peter so long, so you ask questions too or chime in as well. But, you know, Peter, you grew up, I think you were born, if I understand it correctly, south coast of New South Wales, but you moved to Newcastle at a pretty early age. Is that right?
Yeah, we moved to Newey in 1963 to a place called Nobby's Beach in Newcastle, and we were the closest house to the beach. You know, they were all maritime houses, and it was like, you know, less than 100 yards to the beach for me. You know, it was like 1 minute, and it had some quality. 1 quality reef, 2 reefs, and this amazing sandbar that we that used to form, you know, quite a lot. and it would take the world's worst, junkiest storm surf and turn it into this classic wave that was it was so hollow and thick and nasty, but it was only ever good when it was on shore. So on the sea, yeah, because it was offshore, you couldn't catch them. It was so hollow.
And aside from being in a beautiful location with high quality waves, like 63's early on, like did your mom
I
or
didn't
dad
start surfing until 64.
Right. But I'm curious, how did you get into it? Like, did mom or dad surf or siblings
No, they were totally against it. Well, the Nobbies, the surf club was right there, right there, and then so I ended up joining the surf club. How they do all the beach
nipper
stuff. The nippers, yeah, exactly that's me, and then it's a really good friend of mine who was also in the club, and we're still best buddies to this day. He got a surfboard, and big old 9'8". I think it was a Barry Bennett, or it could have been anyway, it was big black, brand new, and I couldn't even pick the thing up, but he got that, and then my very first wave at Nobby's was on his board, and hats off to Dave Kilby for getting me into the surf, and I can still remember the first wave. It was just a little whitewater wave, and I stood up, and this was in the 64 May school holidays, middle of winter, not big start of winter, and no wetsuits, still board shorts, and I caught this whitewater wave, stood up, and that's all she wrote. Been doing it ever since.
Were you always comfortable in the ocean, Peter?
Pardon?
Were you always comfortable in the ocean, like even before you surfed? Did you like being out there?
Yeah, because I was actually swimming a lot. I joined, even in the club, I was training. We'd get up and, I was full on swimming training. I was in the police boys squad, for years and years. And, I'd become a pretty good swimmer, as Bill Boyum would know. And remember when we done the paddle swim around Tavarua?
Yeah, trips to Tavarua when there was no waves, just swimming around the island.
Anyway, getting back to Nobbies and but I was always comfortable in the water, and then in each year, obviously, each week probably, I just got better and better and better, and then the boards changed, and I actually got my mum and dad ended up buying me my first board from my good friend Sam Egan. Bought me a custom board. It was stringerless, and it had a feather in it. It was called like a featherweight, and I think it was a smallish board, but it was I think it was 8 foot. But, and that was, I think that was, I got my first own board in 67, Christmas off. And then I guess it just kept moving, and then all of a sudden I ended up getting sponsored. And then it actually, as the years went on, I ended up being with Sam, and Sam took me through, when my brother was actually sponsored by Sam Egan at the time, when I went there, and my Jimmy went through with Fitzy, Terry Fitz, and then finally Sam, and then when he went, I don't know where he went after that, but I jumped in with Sam, and then Sam just showed me the ropes of shaping my own boards, but I had a lot of Sam boards, they were amazing. He's amazing.
And obviously, like, radically different time, like compared to 2024. So information didn't move as quick. But for someone like yourself, Peter, I believe you finished runner-up in the juniors division to in the Aussie national titles, right? To Mark Richards.
Yeah. And what about this? In '74, I was surfing. I was in the Australian titles, and we got, ended up. I was in the final, the end, and there was so the lineup in that grand final. There was, I think, MP, PT, Rabbit, Mark Warren, Richard Harvey, and myself.
Oui.
Yeah, and I ended up coming fifth, and I couldn't even make the drop at Burley. It was just firing, and I'm just sitting out here. But that was the first year. That would have been 70 when I went seniors. So, but that was a hell of a lineup.
Right, that's incredible.
Those
And
guys.
I'm curious, Gerry, because you're just a couple of years older than Peter, and obviously information travels differently back then. But when did you first encounter either the name or the person Peter McCabe? Maybe the first time you heard of him was the first time you met him. I'm curious as to how you became aware of him.
In Bali.
Yep.
Yeah, him and Doris, they were surfing this spot down the ways called Padang Padang, and I go, well, Uluwatu's always bigger. And they go, yeah, but Padang Padang's better. And, back then you didn't have like videos or, you couldn't see what they were doing. Nobody had, anybody took a picture, you had to go get it developed. And so, we heard all this talk, and then, they came up a couple of times to Uluwatu, and that's kind of how we met. And then, that first trip to G-Land was in '76, and I went on a boat with Bobby, who has a surf camp now, and Mike Boyum, and was that Glenn?
Yeah.
Glenn Ritchie.
Yeah.
And Peter and Fitzy and Dickie Houle and Dave Michelle, they all came on a local boat out of Benoa, and we kind of just met there, and that's when we started thinking about maybe we better come back and try and figure this place out, because we sure didn't figure anything out on that first trip. And it really was Mike Boyum who brought Peter and I together. And, I think the three of us were pretty inseparable for quite a number of years there.
Yeah.
And we really felt that we had something very special going in that surf camp at G-Land.
Yeah. You mentioned Doris before, Gerry. So it's Tony Eltherington for people who don't know, and he's I met Doris almost 10 years ago in the Mentawais. He's a famed Mentawai boat captain at the moment. But the amazing thing about Doris that I ended up learning was just how accomplished he was at swimming and surfing, competitive surfing in his youth. But I'm curious, Peter, similar to you, because it was kind of in the pre-industry, pre-professional surfing era of surfing, there weren't a lot of avenues for talented surfers like yourself or Tony to go, yep, that'll be the career I'll have. Like, you end up becoming board builders, or you end up adventuring. And I'm curious if that's a fair take on, as you were getting better as a junior, as you were getting better as a competitor, how are you viewing your career prospects at that point?
I never ever even thought about it being a career. I have to tell you, it never ever entered my mind. But and then when I started shaping. I mean, I've never even had a real job other than shaping, and I that's all I do right now. I'm just go down and shape it. I never ever thought I'd even make any money from it, but I just started doing it. And then, like Gerry said in his movie, and, people just started buying them. I went, people want to buy that? I go, okay, let's make another one. Cool. And then it just kept going, and I'm still doing it. And I don't know, I mean, I can't even change a light bulb or do anything else other than make.
He can. He's actually pretty handy. But, you know, the first I'd heard about him was these two guys that were, you know, getting these fabulous tube rides at this place, and they were called Doris and Mary. And I go, two guys named Doris and Mary? And, you know, and then I got to know him. I went, oh, okay.
That was Rory Russell called me Mary, and I don't know what, I forget what it was, but it was a classic, and he still calls me Mary.
But Peter, were you aware of who Gerry was when you guys met?
Oh yeah. I can remember when we were at Uluwatu, you know, and then we were just only me and him, a couple of guys out, and then I was already out, and then Gerry's come out, and then there's nobody to talk to. And then they just paddled up, and then Gerry paddled up to me and just goes, I'm Gerry. And I said, you know, I'm Peter. I already knew who he was. I was just watching. Look at that.
Yeah.
Now that's how you do it. It's so.
Those were the days.
Oh yeah.
Right. Well, it's interesting to hear you talk about Peter. You're like, well, I didn't have a plan. I was just doing what was in front of me and surfing and shaping, and that ended up being the career. Obviously, it's been decades since these sort of glory days in Indonesia. You guys both have like such an association with the waves there and with pioneering waves there in a lot of ways. And I'm curious in terms of, Peter, when you look back on, you know, the TikTok of life, like how do you say, okay, this was a high point, then I had some low points, now I'm back at a high point? Because you seem like you're in great health despite, you know, coming off of a sickness. You're still going out to Grajagan, you know, almost every year. You know I talked to Gerry, he's in fantastic health. You guys have survived in a way that, like, to be honest, a lot of characters and a lot of icons from that era didn't. So I'm curious how you think about that, Peter.
Yeah, absolutely. I've ridden some, you know, I've had a lot of ups and downs in my thing. And, you know, I guess that whole period of the Sea of Darkness was probably the bottom. And, you know, that wasn't really an accurate portrayal of myself, but it really, if there's any regrets, it's that stuff, because that really held me back from a lot of stuff. One, not being able to go to the US ever, and that's where all my good buddies are, and I've been trying to get around it for like the last 30 years or so, and you know, and it really probably did cost me a lot, but fortunately I was, you know, I've had a lot of really good people, including the man sitting right there, and that's helped me get through this whole deal, you know, and it's, you know, I've come out of it okay. I still really miss being able to go and do all that stuff, but you know, go over, and you know, that's been pretty hard, but I've got through it, and here I am.
Yeah,
still here, you know, still eating. So
still surfing, you know, like
still
something
eating,
that Gerry,
still surfing.
Yeah, Gerry brought
still
this up.
Working.
Yeah, and I remember Gerry brought this up on a previous podcast. We were talking about his time in Hollywood and, you know, seduced by the bright lights and the parties and everything. And Gerry, I remember, I'll paraphrase, but you said something about, you know, waking up feeling terrible one morning and Malibu was pumping, and you just went, that's it. Like, I'm not missing another session because of this lifestyle. But it is like, you know, for as addictive and obsessive as surfing can be for us and cause all sorts of challenges for us, it is sort of a guiding light in a lot of ways too. I'd imagine it's the same for you, Peter.
Yeah, it's exactly that.
Yeah.
You know, I guess if I didn't have surfing and making surfboards and people still wanting them, you know, God only knows what would happen to me. But that's I've been really lucky in that sense, having a great lot of people around me. So
yeah, that
just
makes
keep
a ton of
going.
sense.
Just keep going. Keep
Yeah.
paddling, as you would say.
I think we've been both very fortunate in this lifetime to have been born to be surfers. But I think even the better part of it is that we still enjoy it as much as we do, that we've continued to do
Yes.
everything we can to keep doing it. And I think that, has set us a little bit apart from a lot of our other friends who at some point just for I don't know what reason say, I'm done. I've done it. I don't want to do it anymore. And I think Peter's the same as me. We can't understand that because I think we both still really love doing it. We can't do it quite as like we used to, but we still can get a lot of enjoyment out of it. And it's a very fulfilling thing that's pretty important to us. And that's why we do it.
Yeah, that's just like we do it. Yeah, we can't do it like we used to, but I don't care. I get out. I mean, Joe Biden would have done better than me yesterday, but I
don't think so. Every once in a while you got to pay, and that's one thing you learn in surfing. When you go paddle out, you better have your wallet out because you don't know how much it's going to cost that day.
But, it only takes one or two waves out there in the cold, and then I come in and go, well, glad I went out. And that's it. And then I go in, I can do the rest of the stuff what I got to do for the rest of the day. And, Well,
I'm glad you couldn't see me this morning because I went surfing in the river.
Oh, I bet you killed it, though.
Oh.
But it's of a piece of what you guys have been talking about. I know, Gerry, you and I talked about this, and Peter, you've talked about it in this podcast already, where it's like, yeah, maybe I don't surf the way I did, 40 years ago on that kind of particular equipment, but I still get the same electrifying feeling out of it. And maybe I'm on different equipment, or maybe I'm on different kind of waves, or maybe I'm surfing differently. But that is sort of the light at the end of the tunnel that gets you up every morning, where you're like, oh yeah, I could feel that. And even if the waves look bad, I always think the same thing. I'm like, I've never had a bad session. Like if I go out and I think it's bad, it's always better than I think it is from the shoreline.
Oh, no, I've had some bad sessions where
In fairness, your guys' ceiling's much higher than mine. Mine was just like, oh, I made it out. That's a win. So.
I hope nobody saw that.
Yeah. Oh, I've seen
and that's what,
when you're hitting your board and you're going, and there's no one else around, you're having a bad day.
Right. Well, you guys have never enjoyed the pleasures of anonymity. I get that every day. Everyone, when you paddle out, goes, "Let's Peter McCabe. I want to see something now." Right?
Yeah, and they want to see something like we were 40 years ago. And I just come back on the beach. I just hand them pictures. Yeah, that's it.
I love it. Let's.
But I think
go on.
That's really the thing that has kept us so close over the years is how we make each other laugh at ourselves. And, that's something only really good, close friends can do.
Oh, yeah.
Make you laugh at yourself.
What's the author, Kurt Vonnegut Jr., he said something, and I'll paraphrase, but he's like, there's two responses to trauma in life. You can either laugh or you could cry. I prefer to laugh because there's less cleaning up to do afterwards. I've always appreciated that approach. Let's take one more quick break to get a word in from our sponsors, and when we come back, we will wrap up our conversation with the Gerry Lopez and the Peter McCabe. All right, welcome back to the Lineup Podcast. I am Dave Prodan here with Newcastle's Peter McCabe and Hawaii's, but now Bend, Oregon's Gerry Lopez. Guys, it's been so fun talking to you. And where we were closing out before, you guys are talking about this friendship you guys have had from the first time you met in Bali through now. It's a decades-long friendship. I don't want to be too provocative, but were there any kind of low points? Were there any kind of years where you weren't as close as you guys are now?
I think it's been uphill all the way.
Yeah, I'd have to agree. Even in the Sea of Darkness times, where he helped me out, and that's almost gone from my memory.
Yeah.
But I did see him get angry one time at me that I had to pick him up when he was doing North Shore, and I was staying up at his house, and then the surf was pumping, and I've driven down in the truck, pick him up, got the boards, and we're gonna go and surf. I think Pier 1 maybe or somewhere, and I got a flat tire. He's just got out, and he was that pissed that
I don't even remember that.
that was the best. That's the best ever.
Jerry was channeling Vince Moloka.
I've seen you get grumpy at times, but I'm there, and we went to drive off, and I think I might have been down at some place. I don't know how I got it, but I'm not that good a driver on the left-hand side. Probably hit a few things, but we have to change the tire right there or we're going nowhere. So, do you think I knew how to do it? Nope.
Boy.
Do you think he knew how to do it? Hey, he did, actually. Didn't talk to me all the way. Yelling at me. I just sat there.
I absolutely do not even remember that.
Yeah, that was at North Shore because you'd gone over and you'd give me a couple of rules. And,
so it's just like local tips, man. Like, this is how they stay in line. Who amongst us doesn't need them?
Well, Peter was actually in the movie North Shore, but then when they edited it for television, they cropped the screen, and he was sitting on the end of the bench, and they cut him out. I went, oh, that was a rotten thing to do.
I like it. And Peter, I tell Gerry this every time we talk, but I'd be remiss not to mention that if I open my window, I might be able to see him. But Greg Harrison, who played Chandler in North Shore, is my next door neighbor, and he always speaks fondly of the both of you two.
Yeah. Say hi to him when you see him.
I will. He'll be thrilled. Pete, you mentioned that you were an avid live event watcher, that you watch all the events start to finish, even if the waves are crappy, etc. Talk to me a little bit about the current crop of Australians, specifically the ones from Newcastle. You got Ryan Callanan, a few others from that area that are just such good surfers, and they really stand on the shoulders of folks like Luke Egan, folks like yourself, folks like Mark Richards, who have created such an awesome community there. But what have you noticed in 2024 from the surfing community in Newcastle?
Well, it's really moving ahead. There's some actually younger guys in the the Merriweather Surf Board Riders Club. So they just had their 60th anniversary the other day from the founders, and they're all there, and there's still a few guys that from 60 years ago, but all the young guys are all in there, and there's some really young guys after, like, even below Jackson Baker and Rycal. I mean, these guys are super young, like Ocean Lancaster and a few other guys, young kids, and they're all just moving up, and they're so red hot, they're all, flying along the waves, doing those helicopters and shit. And, it's just, mate, the amount of talent coming out, and it's probably every beach in Australia. It's, that's got those clubs and they're just doing a lot of coaching, and everyone's got a coach these days, and it's pretty amazing. But with like Jackson Baker was unfortunate to be injured this year. Raikal, he's just such a gem of a guy, great surfer, and and we're always up watching, and and those guys, and then of course we've got Hoyo still ripping, Luke's coaching people all over the place, and but it's really great to watch, and it's really good because it gives us an interest to make us go and watch them, especially when the guys are in the events, and we've got Morgan Siblick, and he's I see him quite regularly. I see him all the time when they're around. Yeah.
Yeah, that's such a good thing about Newcastle and Merriweather is it's a solid sized city, but it's a tight knit community, and you have all this talent. And everyone's so friendly, and last week on the podcast for our 200th, we had two-time world champion John Florence, and it was great. Like, he gave us a lot of insight into how he's feeling and how he views his career and how he views the road ahead. He's someone that in a lot of ways was raised by Pipeline, a wave that both of you are very familiar with, and Gerry yourself obviously is synonymous with. Gerry, do you spend a lot of time watching the tour these days? And with John not only representing Team USA in Tahiti, but also current number one in the rankings on the CT, he'll probably be in pole position for the world title WSL finals in September. What are your thoughts on John and his career in general?
I do watch it. I'm just like Peter. I think what we really like is the caliber of the surfing these days, of how good these guys have gotten, the amazing stuff that they pull off, stuff that, I don't know, I still can't even dream of.
No.
But John is really a very special person. He's obviously had so many years right there at the Pipeline, and anytime, pretty much in any wave, I just love the way he surfs. He's got a great shaper. The boards he's riding obviously really are tuned in for him, because stuff that he can do on them is pretty amazing. And I think that as long as he wants to do this, he's going to be right up there at the top. And, when he doesn't want to do the contest anymore, I don't know what he's going to do, because he really has a lot of other interests. He's, quite a sailor as well. And I hear he's gotten into the foiling, and, there's all those other sports too. And I'm sure that he's going to be at the top of those as well.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'm a big fan, a huge fan.
Yeah. Well, before you guys go, we did put out a feeler for questions from the Instagram community at the Lineup Pod. We got a lot back. You guys are really popular boys, as I'd imagine, but we've whittled them down to 3. So I'll ask each of these to both of you. First question is from @Kapani, who asks, how many hours did you surf on average in those early years at Grajagan, and how did you hydrate yourself? Peter, why don't you take that one first, then Gerry, you just add on at the end.
Okay, so how do we hydrate ourselves? Pretty much didn't. But there was a period of time when we'd take the water out, or somebody would bring it out for us, but yeah, it was, we'd come in and we'd be the old tongue would be just swollen out. Yeah. I think I seen Gerry drink some salt water one time, and I don't think that worked. But Yeah, that's pretty much we just stayed out till. But we did have a couple of guys bring out water bottles.
Yeah.
Yeah. When they could clearly see. And I think that's when we had booties that they realized we were out there for the duration.
Right.
And, we'd go out. The sun would be going down when we'd coming in. And,
Yeah.
yeah. And then we'd just drink. And then, you know what? So we're out there, and then you'd go in, and then, wow, we'd just be waiting around, and the dinner was exactly at the right time. We come in, and we think we're going to go and start, after we eat something, we go and lay down, and oh, yeah, let's read a book. Incorrect. You lay down. Next thing, you're looking at the surf again. Yeah, that's about it for me.
Yeah. Yeah, literally we did spend 8 to 10 hours out there in the water quite often. And I always thought that maybe osmosis was, hydrating us in a different way.
Right.
The other thing was that because we'd surf all day, we wouldn't want to eat much in the morning, right, if at all, because, you couldn't really paddle out on a full stomach. So we just eat that one big meal at the end of the day. And, I still do that. I very seldom have breakfast or lunch, and we'll just eat the big dinner. But, a funny story
I
about
still do it.
Having stuff to drink out in the water. Pete, you remember that time all the quickie guys came in with McKnight and all the California guys?
Yeah.
And you remember Ed Miner?
Yes.
And he had that big backpack. He'd paddle out with that big backpack, and he'd anchor it out there. And, the tide was running out, and it was time to go in. And he had this backpack, and, it was kind of dangerous going in at G-Land because it's really a difficult wave to straighten out on because it's so down the line. And oftentimes, you'd straighten out and the thing would just come over and cream you. And so I offered to take his backpack for him. I put this thing on. I go, geez, what has he got in this thing? And of course, I took off on a wave. And as soon as the board tilted up, that backpack came down over my head, and I pearled at the bottom, and I ate it really bad. And the good thing was I got dragged far enough inside that I could catch some whitewater in, and he was waiting on the edge of the reef, and I come in, I go, what do you got in here? And he opens up the backpack. He's got a 6-pack of beer. I'm going, are you kidding me?
Oh, no way.
Those are the days.
They were.
I love it. Next question is from Et Al Kaimi Nopit. Gerry, will start with you, and then Peter, you tag on at the end. Question is, how different was the culture for visiting surfers in Bali back then compared to now?
Well, there weren't that many surfers, period. And tourism was something that, it's actually been around in Bali for a long time because the Balinese people were such friendly people. And most of that tourism was on the east side of the island, on the Sanur side. And the Kuta side was pretty late developing as a tourist area. And, it was more the early low-end kind of tourist backpackers kind of guys. And, of course, that's all changed now. But when the surfers started coming, the Balinese people really welcomed them because that was what they were, the job they were trying to do was to accommodate tourism, and the surfers were the early tourists on that side of the island.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely the surfers made the Kuta side, and then and out at Ulu, it's such big development out there now. You probably would have seen it.
Yeah.
and I can't even find my way around. There's nothing, no familiar landmarks. I got out of the airport's insane just in itself.
Yeah.
You know, I got to have somebody there to pick me up, drive me around. Where are we? Where are we? Where are we going? But yeah, it's true of every place in the world. I mean, Newcastle's not the same as it was 50 years ago. You know, it was nowhere that's escaped the that sort of stuff. You know, look at even the Gold Coast. Everywhere I go to the Gold Coast, I still can't find my way around anymore. You know?
Yeah, surfing has not stopped growing.
No.
Since we started.
That's unbelievable. Last question is from Mitch Tales, my co-host on this podcast on occasion. And the question is, I'll start with you, Peter, and then we'll finish with Gerry. But is the movie North Shore just as cool to look back on for you both as it is for everyone else? Which is an interesting question. But, you know, Peter, Gerry joked about you were in the film, but maybe edited out. Like, how do you look back on the film now compared to when you were doing it?
Well, that's funny because, you know, I haven't seen it for a while. But in saying that, I was just with John Philbin in G-Land just now. And we become very good friends on that set when they were doing the North Shore way back then. And we're still really good buddies right now. And
Turtle.
Yeah. and that's a classic. He was just over there with me just now. And he was there last year when I was there too. And we always go for that similar period, you know, the last few years. And that's funny how you just brought that up. I'm not sure because I haven't seen it, but just in saying that, running into John all the time, and we still talk about it because he went on to do Point Break and all that other stuff. And but he's still surfing really good. He just loves it, and it's all good.
Yeah. What about you, Gerry? How do you look back on that film?
Well, you know, 32 years ago when I first came to Bend, the core snowboard shop was named North Shore. And I went, and I went in there and, you know, since most of the guys there are still, you know, longtime friends of mine, but it was named after the movie and they'd loop the movie all day long in the shop every day, you know, so I walked in and they went, Vince! And it was pretty funny. It's funny how that movie, which was really a great script the first time I read it, and I showed it to Peter, and he went, that's a believable story.
Right.
Because, you know, back then that wave pool in Arizona was the very first one.
Yeah.
And I don't know if it's even still there or not, but the people that were involved in that movie have somehow stayed kind of in touch with each other, you know, and again, Turtle, that movie changed him, changed his life. He pretty much let go of his acting career to become a surfer because he became a hardcore surfer in that movie, in his mind and in his spirit. And I think that movie moved him more than it did anybody else in the world.
That's awesome.
And it's kind of fun to see that.
It is funny. You know, Peter, you mentioned you hadn't seen it in a few years, and I hadn't either, but, you know, I've got twins and they're 10 now, and I put it on for them, and I was like, that's our neighbor. And they're like, whoa, like their heads, brains go all over the map. It's pretty good. But thanks to everyone who wrote in those questions. That's the lineup pod. We're now down for the final segment for you guys. This is the lightning round. So these are 10 questions for you guys to answer as quickly as you can. I'll ask the question, then Peter, you go first, Gerry, you go second, and we'll just do it that way. Sound good? All right. First question, Peter. If you could only have one board setup for the rest of your life, single fin, twin fin, thruster, quad, bonzer, or finless, which would you choose?
Twin fin.
Gerry?
20.
Okay. Next question, Peter. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Tea.
Mm-hmm. Peter, burrito or pizza?
Burrito.
Burrito.
Okay. Peter, last book you read.
I don't even know if I can read.
Hey, that's an answer. Gerry?
Reread probably the 50th time old Louis L'Amour.
Wow.
Peter, best surf film ever.
Oh, there's too many. Storm Riders.
Oh, that's a great one. Gerry?
I just watched Barefoot Adventure last night. Bruce Brown.
That's a good one. Wow. Peter, next question. What is one wave you never have to go back to?
Redhead Shore Break.
That's a good one. Gerry?
Waimea.
Okay. Peter, next question. If you could only surf one wave the rest of your life, you can dreamcast it, perfect conditions, just your best friends, what wave would it be?
I'd say G-Land.
Gerry?
Kelly Slater's wave pool.
Oh, all right. You're looking for
Which
an
I'd
invite
love
back.
to surf.
That's a good one.
I'd love to surf that.
One of these days you will.
Yeah.
Where am I now? Peter, best person to share a lineup with?
You're sitting right next to him, or he's on the screen. Right in
Digitally
front of
sitting
me.
next to him. Okay, well, this is pressure's on, Gerry. Who's the best person to share a lineup with for you?
Likewise.
Oh, okay, good. Good. Peter, worst person to share a lineup with?
The late Mike Boyum.
Oh, yeah. He wanted our waves every time. Oh, boy.
That's a good answer. Last one, Peter. Finish this sentence. I will next achieve a state of happiness by...
Catching my next wave.
Good answer. Gerry?
I think the same thing.
You guys, this has been such a privilege for me. Peter McCabe, Gerry Lopez, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. Thank you so much for sharing your stories and your background, your histories with the listeners. I am a lifelong fan of the both of you guys, and I hope we get to do this again real soon. It's been fun.
Thank you, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. That was great.
Yeah, I think
See
we
you
both
later,
enjoyed
GL.
it. Petey, I'll talk
It
to you
was
later.
great seeing you too.
Thank you, guys.
Bye-bye.
Sayonara. Bye.